Well, good Tuesday morning, everybody. It is March 16th, and it's 2021, just in case someone's watching this a few years from now or a year from now or whatever. And we are continuing our study through the book of Acts as we walk our way through. Today we are in the 4th chapter. We're going to look at verses 13 to 22 today is the bit we're biting off. And if you'll recall where we left off yesterday, Peter and John have appeared before whatever body this is. I'm not convinced 100% that this is the Sanhedrin, as many are, because it doesn't say that in verse 5. It just says rulers, elders, scribes assembled in Jerusalem, and then it goes on in verse 6 with Ananias and the high priest, Caiaphas, John, and Alexander, and that's Jonathan, who's part of the family of the high priest, and Alexander, and all who were of the high priest of the family. So this seems to be more of to me, I see this as more of the power behind the throne, the shadow government, if you will. This is the power. This is Ananias is not the high priest. He was deposed before this, several decades before this, but he seems to still be the one in control behind the throne. And Caiaphas is, of course, his son-in-law. And I think I mentioned yesterday that his grandson is the one that has James the Just, Jesus' brother, martyred in the year 67. So he seems to be, so I suspect this is not technically the Sanhedrin, which might explain a little bit of why they don't do anything to the disciples. I don't know. Especially when we go back into the second verse of this chapter, where it's talking about that the reason they had them arrested to begin with was because they were talking about the resurrection of the dead. The Pharisees wouldn't have had a problem with that, and there were Pharisees on the Sanhedrin, so that would have been that would have caused infighting. And you would think that there would have been some mention of that contesting, because the Pharisees very much believed in the resurrection of the dead. They might not have believed that Jesus was resurrected, but that's not what they arrested him for. Because of the resurrection of the dead. They're talking about the general resurrection. They're talking about the end times. So, any rate, let that be what it may. That's where we left off. Peter got up and again very boldly preached about who Jesus was and pointed fingers, and he named names, as they say, and quoted scripture as to about who Jesus was. All right, so let's pick up in chapter 4, verses 13 to 22 is where we're going today. So, now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and realized that they were uneducated and ordinary men, they were amazed and recognized them as companions of Jesus. When they saw the man who had been cured standing beside them, they had nothing to say in opposition. So they ordered them to leave the council while they discussed the matter with one another. They said, "What will we do with them? For it is obvious to all who live in Jerusalem that a notable sign has been done through them. We cannot deny it. But to keep it from spreading further among the people, let us warn them to speak no more to anyone in this name." So they called them and ordered them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered them, "Whether it is right in God's sight to listen to you rather than to God, you must judge. For we cannot keep from speaking about what we have seen and heard." After threatening them again, they let them go, finding no way to punish them because of the people. For all of them praised God for what had happened. For the man on whom this sign of healing had been performed was more than 40 years old. Okay, so it mentions right out of the gate in verse 13 about the boldness that Peter and John have. And of course, this is part of the reason why I believe that there was something special about the Sunday morning, Easter Sunday morning, the resurrection of Christ, is the change in the disciples. They went from this pack of guys that fled, and at best they are back in the crowd at the crucifixion. They certainly are not at the foot of the cross like the women are. They aren't there, and so we don't have them being bold at that point. And of course, Peter denies. We talked about that, I believe, yesterday. Denied 3 times in the courtyard, knowing Jesus and having anything to do with Jesus. And here, of course, now he's not. And of course, here it also mentions that they recognize these 2 guys as Jesus' companions. It's like, well, wait a minute. These guys were with that guy we crucified the other day, and he's the one they're talking about in the courtyards and all of that. So They not only do they know that these guys were talking about Jesus, they recognize them as part of that group, which would, if they were Galilean, they would have been speaking with a Galilean accent and all of that. So it's not a surprise they recognize them. Another thing here where it says they had to leave, so they ordered them to leave the council. Now we could take that as meaning the Sanhedrin, but it doesn't say the Sanhedrin, it's just the council. I don't know what that means. Again, I'm not, there's enough there for me to have a little bit of doubt. I'm not sure it really matters, to be honest, but I'm kind of uncertain on that one. So what they do, they tell him, we can't do anything because this guy that they healed, everybody knew him. He was at the gate. He was at the beautiful gate. Everybody saw him there for all those years. He's 40 years old. He'd been there a long time. Jesus had walked by him, no doubt. Why Jesus didn't heal him, I don't know. People speculate on that. I don't know. Was he left there because he was so, such a well-known figure? So many people would have not necessarily known his name, but they would recognize his face if he were there. Doubtful they bothered to get his name. They probably just walked by him, but they saw him there, and he was there all the time, every day, for all those years, decades. And so, was that why Jesus left him? For this very reason? I don't know. Could be, might be. I don't know. Not sure that it matters. But at any rate, he's well known. So, and he's well known to have been born lame, and he's been there all that long. So it wasn't like it was just a charade. That's the point. This isn't like some, you see that unfortunately today, and have seen it for a while. Some of these faith healers, they're putting on a show. They've got plants in the audience that claim to be lame, and he miraculously healed them. That didn't happen because this guy had been there for so long. Everybody knew he was lame. So it's genuine miracle. Genuinely, these guys have healed him. And they've restored him. Again, that whole thing about the sin. They brought him back to being in the community. But in fact, they didn't bring him back. They put him into community. He was always excluded because he was lame from birth. But they warned them not to talk about Jesus anymore. And of course, their response is, hey, what are you talking about, guys? We've got to talk about God. Whether it's you decide whether I should listen to you or listen to God. And my personal opinion, and I think they're right, or their opinion, and my opinion as well, better to listen to God than to listen to man. If God's telling you to talk and man's telling you to be quiet, best listen to God, because all the man can do is kill you, right? You need to be obedient to God. So that's their response, and whatever body this is, they're stymied by this. They don't know what to do. They can't punish him at this point because the people are all stirred up, and so they got him. Gotcha, as they say. And it's interesting because they do keep preaching in the temple for a long time. This is immediately after Jesus' birth, or death rather, not birth, death, and so this is, early on, and they keep doing this for another 60, not 60, 30 some years. James, 30 some years. Year 67 is when James is martyred by Ananias' grandson. So for 30 some years, 3 decades, they are still in the temple preaching. So it's not a problem for the priests that they deal with quickly, is that they, for some reason, they're forced to have to accommodate this going on, and they do, at least in some way. So that's an interesting part about this. What we take away from this is where are we at in the world today? Society doesn't want us to preach about Jesus, does it? Society, tries to put a thumb, if you will, on talking about God. In some ways, church does too. In very many ways, you can't preach that way. That you shouldn't do that. So we see a lot of that too. Don't talk about that. Don't mention that. And definitely get chastised, and seeing some of that going on, but more behind the scenes than above the scenes, but you definitely see some of it in the open too. So, any rate, it's interesting. But the bottom line is we have to always remember we have to stay faithful to what God is calling us to do. God's telling us to preach Christ, crucified, resurrection, and the Word of God. That's what we're called to do. No matter what society, no matter what the church. Because here, this is the religious authorities too. It's very much common. It's a very direct parallel comparison. So you need to remember that. Okay, well, that's where I'm going to leave you today. As we continue to go on from here, we'll see what happens tomorrow. We'll see if they're as bold tomorrow as they were today. They were definitely been bold here. So God bless them. God bless you. Enjoy the day, and please be a blessing to someone today. Tell them about Jesus, for crying out loud. All right? We'll see you all in the morning. Bye-bye. Oh, don't forget, Thursday we have soup supper. If you haven't got yourself down for that, if you want it delivered, call the office and tell Clint you want how much soup you want. Okay? Chili and cinnamon rolls. Donna's cinnamon rolls. Can't beat that with a stick. See you later. Bye-bye.